this is Al Finch. I am here today to talk to you about the Zombie Horde. Now, ever since I was a small child, it should be known that I was allowed to watch all types of horrible movies. That included things like Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, and a lot of the line of George Romero zombie movies. Ever since that time, I have been a fan of the genre. Yes, mildly traumatized, but I think it's probably been more fun for me than terrifying. So when I heard about a Magic variant, this was probably in the mid to early 2000s, where you could fight against a zombie horde, I investigated that and developed a Zombie Horde deck to go along with that format. So today what I'm going to be doing is dissecting my classic Zombie Horde deck. Now, I haven't played against this in a while. I don't have a clear recollection of what's in here, so exploring what I have inside this box is going to be probably almost as much a revelation for me as it is for you. So go along, I'll give you a little bit of background on why some of the cards are in here, why I vaguely remember choosing them at least. I'll also make sure to give you an overview here of what the rules are. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and get this box open so we can start examining what's inside. The way you may have noticed, I have this plane chase box featuring the zombies, I believe probably from Shards of Alara set. This is one of my favorite boxes, and it fits my zombie deck quite perfectly. You may notice there are also some oversized cards in here. I'll hopefully be able to delve into the reasons why I have those in here as well. All right, so here are our standard sized cards, though. We have my zombies. Now, the thing about the zombie deck for the zombie hordes and Magic was people were looking at all of these tokens that had been coming out over the years. And they were like, these are not useful to me, at least maybe if they weren't playing with the particular themes. And so some people were looking at reasons to use those tokens in other ways. I think that might have been one of the driving forces behind the Zombie Horde deck. Now, how does the Zombie Horde deck work? Well, I actually have a little rule sheet here that I made up. This site that I referenced no longer exists, but if you go into the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine, you can still find it. Rules that I found at wooburg.net. The gentleman that ran that site, I collaborated with briefly before it shut down, and I thought it was just wonderful that he was collecting all of these variant magics, and I would often print out the rules from his site onto little cards that I would hand out to other players to make their life a little easier, or so that they could spread the word about these different ways to play Magic. Horde Magic, all right, is for 1 to 4 players. The players are called survivors in this format and have a shared life total of 20 plus 10 life per survivor. For example, a team of 3 survivors would start with collective 50 life. The Horde library starts with 100 cards and puts 10 cards for each survivor less than 4 facing it directly into its graveyard at the start of the game. For example, a team of 3 survivors would play against a Horde with 90 cards in its library and 10 in its graveyard at the start. So the Horde deck doesn't have a life total. The number of cards in the Horde deck then determines how long your game is going to last and what it can throw at you. So reducing the number of cards in the deck makes it a little easier on people, especially if you're playing with a small team or you're playing solo. The Horde ignores all effects that refer to players and cannot be targeted as a player, but the Horde can be targeted and affected by cards that refer to opponents. Players can also attack the Horde. For each point of damage done to the Horde puts the top card of the Horde deck into the Horde's graveyard. Survivors take turns simultaneously and go first, beginning play as normal. The Horde begins play at the end of the Survivor's 3rd turn. The Survivors alternate turns with the Horde thereafter. On each of the Horde's turns, the top card of its library is flipped over till a non-token card is revealed. All of the tokens flipped this way enter the battlefield, and the non-token card is then cast. If there are cards in the Horde's hand, they are also cast at this point. It's kind of a fail-safe in case somebody bounces a Horde. Spells cast by the Horde can be countered normally. The Horde is considered to have infinite mana of all colors if a card asks the Horde to pay costs for any reason. That's kind of a fail-safe against decks that might put up, say, a propaganda or similar type wall that would keep the creatures from the Horde deck from attacking. The Horde cannot make any decisions, so outcomes of any choices it would make must be determined at random. If you watched my earlier version playing the Minotaur Horde, you notice this significantly differs in that, in that Horde, you get to choose what happens. I don't like necessarily having the easy way out. I like bad stuff to happen and challenging things to happen from time to time that surprise me. So that is something that I agree with, is determining at random versus actual decisions made by the players in their favor. All of the Horde's creatures have haste and must attack each turn if able, and the Horde creatures cannot block even if they are untapped. Again, that saves you decision making. Survivors defend as a team like players would in a two-headed giant game. So you'll have essentially a common pool of life points. I like that better than having separate life totals. The off chance that somebody gets eliminated and they have to sit out. I'd much rather everybody always be playing until the whole team loses or wins. Finally, the survivors win when the Horde deck can't flip over any more cards and the Horde doesn't control any creatures. So, this is similar in many ways to the official product, the Minotaur Horde, but it's got a number of tweaks. But frankly, this isn't even the original set of Horde rules that came out. It's a set that I've refined and tweaked as well. So you might not find this variant anywhere else, at least exactly as it is. So, as one might guess, a lot of the cards in the deck are actually zombie tokens. And there's a whole bunch of your generic 2/2 zombies in here. There are, however, over the years, new tokens that have come out, and I've started to integrate those into the deck. So you may have seen, for instance, the zombie armies that came out of Amonkhet. These were 0/0 creature tokens. One of the things I like to do with these is say that they're actually coming into play and they have a randomly determined number of power and toughness. Often what I would do is I would take a six-sided die and roll it and then place the number on there. So if I rolled a 6 out of 6, it would sit on there. We'd have a 6/6 creature that's entered play. There are a number of spells that are in the deck. This one is from Unglued or Unhinged, the Zombie Bloodletter. I tried to stay on theme, but you may see that there are some cards that are in here less for their theme and more for the interesting effect that they might have. This one says, when the names of 3 or more non-land permanents begin with the same letter, sacrifice Bloodletter. If you do, it deals 2 damage to each creature and each player. I like putting in cards in the Zombie Horde deck that if you can make things on the board meet a certain condition, can set off a potentially disastrous or potentially beneficial effect. If this creature does 2 damage to each creature and each player, it'll take out all of the other zombies, at least the regular zombies on the board, as well as any like little creatures that the players might have. That might actually be better for the player team, and so they might conspire together to meet this condition. So that's the reason why I've included the Bloodletter in this deck. It is a 2/3 creature, so zombie, again, meeting the theme. So it does not die to its own effect. So this is something that could come out on the board and stay there and wreak havoc turn after turn, where it would kind of keep the little creatures off the board. There were zombie giants that were introduced, probably in the Zendikar set. This is just a vanilla 5/5 zombie token. Big tokens are still a lot more difficult to deal with than smaller ones typically. There's another zombie horror. This is again another one that I would roll a die, probably a 6-sided, and place it on here to determine how powerful it was. When Amonkhet came out, they had a lot of creatures that would amass 2 or amass zombies that would create a zombie army. So we would take zombie army tokens from outside the game and put them into play whenever these hit the battlefield. And if you are, not careful, these will continue to help amass any zombie armies that hit the field. This one also typically, this is the Eternal Skylord. This grants flying to the zombie tokens, which makes them much more challenging to block. And it's a zombie wizard that's also a 3/3, so it's no slouch in the stats department either. Also in the same theme of Amonkhet, army granting creatures, we have the Gleaming Overseer. That zombie wizard, it's a 1/4, and when it enters the battlefield, it amasses 1. Puts that +1/+1 counter on an army we control. If you don't control one, create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first. Zombie tokens have hexproof and menace. That gets even worse for you, right? Not only do they get evasion, but now you can't target them directly. You've got to take this guy out first. I like putting in some nasty artifacts. For this one, I often imagine kind of like the nasty stuff that you saw, just bones of animals and things that are set out to try and ward people away from areas. It almost reminds me a little bit of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I feel like this Ward of Bones artifact fits into the atmosphere of the deck quite nicely. And it says, each opponent who controls more creatures than you can't play creature cards. The same is true for artifacts, enchantments, and lands. So when this thing comes into play on the side of the Horde, all of the survivors are now having to look at the total number of zombies in play. And if they have more creatures out collectively, all right, that's fine, right? If the zombie horde has more creatures than you can play. But if it doesn't have more creatures than you, then you can't play more cards. As it's kind of an equalizer. If you're managing to wipe the board on the zombies every turn, this prevents you from pressing the advantage. It's got to let you put zombies out so that you can play your own creatures in response. Matter of fact, this one freezes your land count, which can be quite nasty. The zombie horde has no land, so as long as this is on the board, your lands don't develop. If it comes out early, we might make a ruling that it gets shuffled back in, but I like the effect that it has in mid to late game where it keeps you from progressing too quickly, makes you really dig for those artifacts or mana dork creatures. This does at least have artifacts in the deck, and so you could put out an artifact if this is out, because it counts itself. And then I don't know if there are any enchantments in the deck or not, but this might prevent you from putting out enchantments altogether as well. All right, should probably be putting them into this pile so I can dissect the other side, so to speak. The Undead War Chief. That's a Undead War Chief creature zombie. I think this is from the Legion set, something like that. Zombies you control get +2/+1. So it just gives a big boost to everything that's out there. The zombie spells you play cost 1 less. It's ineffective against the deck, so it doesn't apply to the play of the horde. It just plays whatever it plays. And, this one's a 1/1, but it's technically a 3/2 when it hits the field. So it can make the small zombie tokens pretty terrifying pretty quick. I like putting in a number of board sweepers, keep those chump blockers out of the way. So we have This really simple spell from Homeland's Dry Spell. Sorcery, Dry Spell deals 1 damage to each creature and each player. This doesn't make the deck lose any cards. It only affects the surviving players. Doesn't get rid of the zombies, but it does get rid of anything that's small that's out that the players may have summoned. So it's a pretty annoying card when it hits. The Malfield Twins, which came from, my goodness, this one probably came from a Planeswalker deck or something like that, a commander deck. I suspect it's out of Innistrad. Yeah, it's quoting Gisa. When Malfield Twins dies, create a 2/2/2 black zombie creature tokens. It's a 4/4. So this one, when you take it off the board, you get 2/2/2 zombies in response. Not real great for anything but limited play, but fun in this deck. I like using cards like this. A lot of good flavor, but not often seen. I have made some custom tokens to make life harder for the survivors. This says Wings of Night. It's an elemental zombie, and it says creatures the Horde control have flying, and it's a 3/7. So this is a large zombie that makes all of your other zombies and itself fly, and it's hard to remove because of that high toughness. So kind of a broad effect to help make those zombie tokens more difficult to deal with. Dance of Shadows. I really enjoy the artwork on this one. I think this is out of Betrayers of Kamigawa, or maybe Kamigawa itself. I think it fits the theme real well. A sorcery here, where creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain fear. Again, helps push those zombie tokens through and make them a little more terrifying. Zombie Giants, the Zombie Vulture, just kind of a play on the typical zombie token, just so they're not all the same all the time. This one flies as a 2/2. Lightning Reaver, this one's a nasty one to include in the deck. Lightning Reaver is a zombie beast. It has fear. For those of you that don't recall fear, by the way, basically means that you can't block it unless you have an artifact creature or a black creature blocking it. Fear and haste. Whenever Lightning Reaver deals combat damage to a player, put a charge counter on it. At the end of your turn, Lightning Reaver deals damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to each opponent. So this one scales with the number of players. So you've got a team of 3 survivors facing off against the Horde deck. This is going to do equal amount of damage to each of those players. So let's say it had 3 counters on there. The whole team is taking 9 damage to the face. So this is one of those, again, that helps put pressure on the players. I like how it scales and make the game more difficult. This one is a blank zombie token. I can't remember where I got it from exactly. I think it was either a card shop or a company that was giving these away for free. Since there was no number, I treat this the same way that I treat the zombie armies, where when it comes out into play on its own, I roll a 6-sided die, set it on there, and that's now its power and toughness. Another blank token, just different art. I really loved these. Those were, I think, very cool full-body tokens. Scourge Servant. This one kind of takes a different tack. I threw in a couple of zombies. Since you talk about the zombie plague, I thought it would be cool to throw in some that have the infect ability. When this creature deals damage to a creature, and it does it in the form of -1/-1 counters, and it does it to the players in form of poison counters. So you have to watch this one. If it gets through, you could lose the game even more quickly due to the accumulation of poison counters against your group. It also makes chump blocking a little more difficult, or if you have a large creature that would eat this, it takes that large creature down a peg or 2. Another Amonkhet, or at least something out of the Amonkhet block. Baddie, the Invading Manticore. When it enters the battlefield, amass 2, and it's a 4/5. There's some more zombie tokens. Here's another blanketing kind of destruction effect. Cower in Fear. Creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 till end of turn. So very similar to that dry spell. Bottomless Pit, another one to put pressure on the survivors. An enchantment during each player's upkeep that player discards a card at random. So, you can't sit there and try and block a bunch of their zombies and stockpile cards while you're sitting there. You got to keep acting and act quickly or you'll run out of cards regardless. Noxious Ghoul, this is one of my favorite sweepers in the deck. A zombie, whenever Noxious Ghoul or another zombie comes into play, all non-zombie creatures get -1/-1 till end of turn. So this one is very one-sided in favor of the Horde. If you don't deal with it, it will keep your board clear. Another kind of surprise card encourages folks that play the deck to keep their blockers up, Triumph of the Hordes. I just love the fact that the name lines up here, right? Even though the art doesn't really, well, I guess Glissa is considered a zombie, but, the bugs or whatever they are in the background, or maybe those are worms, don't exactly fit. In any case, it's a horde, and it's going to make them triumph. Till end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and infect. So, yep, this one can take out the survivors real quick if they aren't being careful. This is an old one, all right? Another Ice Age card. An enchantment for Limdul's Hex. During your upkeep, Limdul's Hex deals 1 damage to each player. Each player may play black or 3 colorless mana to prevent the damage to himself or herself. So again, it scales with the players, and it puts a pressure on them, a downward pressure on them, keeps them working towards defeating the Horde, not sitting on their haunches, just blocking. Grave Peril. This is one that I love because it takes the Horde and gives it a little bit of, equivalent player agency. Grave Peril enchantment. Whenever a non-black creature comes into play, sacrifice Grave Peril. If you do, destroy that creature. So, rather than having to deal with a random trigger for, destroying a creature, like by putting in, a terror spell in here, this determines the target, right? It takes out a creature as soon as it comes into play. I love the fact, too, of the flavor, how well it matches. Sometimes the grave does not wait for death before relishing its feast of flesh and bones. So I think that fits the deck rather well. I love finding cards that kind of do specific things and help the Horde. All right. Blood Reckoning. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that creature controller loses 1 life. So this comes out. It makes it more difficult to attack the Horde. Since it can't block, it instead gives you a disincentive to actually attacking. So I kind of like putting that one in. A dragon zombie, 8/8 flyer. Enough said about that. Festering March. I like this one because it keeps coming back. It's a sorcery. Creatures your control get -1/-1 till end of turn. Remove Festering March from the game with 3 time counters on it. And so it gains, it's got Suspend. At the beginning of your upkeep, you remove a time counter. When the last is removed, you play it without paying its mana cost. So this thing comes back every 3 turns. You get a -1/-1 against the survivor's creatures. So it's another board sweeper that's difficult to deal with and keeps happening. Barter and Blood. I think this one works out pretty well. Kind of clears the player's side of the board, again, favoring the Horde. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures, sorcery. An Infectious Horror. It's only a 2/2, but whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 2 life. So it's basically some uncounterable damage. If this thing gets its attack trigger on the stack, and say you've got 3 players playing against the Horde, you're just losing 6 life. It doesn't matter what you do. You got to get this thing off the board, especially if you are, playing at higher player counts. It takes big chunks of life, one swing at a time. Invade the city, some more Amonkhet block goodness. Amass X, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. So, you would have to look at the discarded cards, which there should be a good number of because you're constantly milling the Horde deck. And it just puts a giant zombie out onto the battlefield. Another Amonkhet block staple, Visor of the Scorpion. The Vizier of the Scorpion enters the battlefield amass 1, and zombie tokens you control have Death Touch. Makes it unpleasant to block those tokens, even the small ones. It's a 1/1 itself. Ruination, not necessarily perfect for the zombie theme, but it is apocalyptic at least, and that's what I always imagine the zombie apocalypse, right? We destroy all non-basic lands. I often imagine that, like, all those places that you would go during the zombie refuge, if they've fallen into decay or they aren't maintained, they aren't usable anymore. So this takes care of people that are, relying too heavily on a multicolor mana base. They've got to be careful and be aware of that. Languish, this one straight up just gets rid of any creature 4 toughness or less on the board. All creatures get -4/-4 end of turn. So fun for wiping out even those indestructible or regenerating creatures. Reign of Gore, it's an enchantment. If a spell or ability would cause its controller to gain life, that player loses that much life instead. So again, puts a clock on the players, the ones that are using life gain to help make their way. It stops that. It tamps that down. You might recognize the art on this one. I stole it from another famous card. This is a Temporal Abomination, a zombie horror. When the Temporal Abomination enters the battlefield, the Horde takes an extra turn after this one. So, yeah, that's time-walking zombies, and it's a 2/6. Usurper of the Dead. I always thought that one of the more horrible things in the zombie movies were that, after somebody died to the bite of a zombie, they came back of a zombie themselves. And if it was a character that everyone cared about, it made it all the much more horrible that they were trying to, eat their once friends' faces. Well, this plays into that. This is a custom token too. Zombie horror. When Usurper of the Dead enters the battlefield, choose a survivor at random. All creature cards in that player's graveyard are returned to the battlefield under the control of the Horde. So if you've got good creatures that you've lost along the way, they come back and haunt you. They come back under the control of the Horde. This one's a 5/2. Infest, another kind of small blanket board wipe. This one's a little bit more helpful in that it probably also wipes out all of the small zombies. All creatures get -2/-2 till end of turn. You think about the zombies just being infested and falling apart, right? This one dealt with a constant problem that I would often face. Another custom token here, Betrayer of the Living. It's a zombie advisor. As long as Betrayer of the Living is on the battlefield, damage dealt by zombies cannot be prevented, and all effects that keep zombies from attacking are ignored. All right, so somebody's got a moat out, for instance. Not necessarily a common occurrence these days, but if there's anything that people just set out, oh, I've got the perfect enchantment, and they laugh and they slap it out, and the zombies can't attack, well, this ignores that effect, all right? They just say, no, they're going to attack anyway. This guy's going to let them sneak past whatever defenses you've got out. He's a 1/5, so yeah, it's kind of a play on, the classic, betrayal that you sometimes see in those old zombie horror movies, where somebody does something to hurt all of the other living people, even when it goes against their best interest. The zombies are coming. I'm going to lock myself in this room and not let anyone else in. Well, this is in that flavor, right? It's where the thing messes with you and your thought of unity and safety. Everlasting Torment is an enchantment, again, that puts a clock on you. Players can't gain life, damage can't be prevented, and all damage is dealt as though its source has Wither, right? So it keeps you from, again, buffering your life, which I find is sometimes a problem when you're playing against Horde decks. Protection creatures become less useful, and of course, blocking the zombie creatures with larger creatures eventually wears the larger creatures down. So another cool card. When this came out, Fleshbag Marauder, I thought this was a perfect fit for the deck. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. So scaling creature removal. It's a 3/1. Another custom token, the Chaos Shaman. Zombie Shaman. Whenever the Chaos Shaman enters the battlefield, the survivor chooses one sorcerer instant card at random from the Horde's graveyard and exiles it. At the end of the turn, the Horde casts that card from exile without paying its mana cost. So it gives you a little bit of surprise double spells during the Horde's turn. It's a 2/1. Zombie Wizard, they suck, but hey, you need to catch a break every once in a while, right? A 1/1 vanilla zombie. Fine seeing that hit the battlefield when I'm a survivor. Desolation, at the enchantment, at the end of each turn, each player who tapped a land for mana during that turn sacrifices a land. If a plane's sacrificed this way, Desolation deals 2 damage to that plane's controller. Again, it's kind of the apocalyptic landscape and how the zombies are making it hard for you to access all your resources. Kill a creature, destroy the present. Kill the land, destroy the future. Karavek, so it's out of Visions. Wave of Terror. It's cumulative upkeep 1. Enchantment. At the end of your upkeep, bury each creature with a casting cost equal to the Wave of Terror's last paid cumulative upkeep. So we have this kind of slow doom as it destroys every creature on the board except for tokens, which have typically a 0 casting cost. So this one keeps the zombies going, but takes care of almost all of the other creatures on the board eventually if you don't get it off the board. Siphon Flesh. Each other player sacrifices a creature. Put a 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield for each creature sacrificed this way. So not only is everybody losing a creature, then there's a zombie that pops up to replace it. Smallpox. Each player loses 1 life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature, then sacrifices a land. It's just, the horrible luck that sometimes pops up in those old zombie movies. Here it is manifested in a card. Call to the Grave. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-zombie creature. At the end of the turn, if no creatures are in play, sacrifice Call to the Grave. That's an excellent card for the Zombie Horde deck. Forsaken Wastes. Players can't gain life. You can tell I really hated it when people would just build up their life totals so that the zombies didn't matter. Forsaken Waste is an enchant world. Not too many people play the enchant world subtypes anymore, but if you were to play another enchant world, you could get rid of this. During the player's upkeep, that player loses 1 life. Forsaken Waste is the target of a successfully cast spell. That spellcaster loses 5 life. It's just unpleasant to have to deal with. Zombie Vandal. Maybe you've got an artifact out that's causing problems for the Horde. Well, this custom token says when Zombie Vandal enters the battlefield, each survivor sacrifices an artifact. It's a 3/2 zombie barbarian. Another Nemo Zombie Wizard. Plague Boiler. Beginning of your upkeep artifact. Beginning of your upkeep, put a plague counter on Plague Boiler. Spend 1 green, 1 black, 1 colorless. Put a plague counter on Plague Boiler or remove a plague counter from it. This one won't ever really come into effect. But it does say when Plague Boiler has 3 or more plague counters on it, sacrifice it if you do destroy all non-land permanents. So you can think of like those zombie plagues, right? Where they just destroy the landscape and everything around it. Delirium Skeins. Each player discards 3 cards. Pretty devastating if it hits at the wrong time. Somebody is holding back a card that they can use to save them from the zombies attacking like a fog. This pretty much messes that plan up. Nested Ghoul, Zombie Warrior 4/2. Whenever a source deals damage to Nested Ghoul, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. So, kind of a fun, like, you kill this zombie, but you get more out of it. Endless Ranks of the Dead. I believe that's, some classic Innistrad again there. Beginning of your upkeep, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is half the number of zombies you control around it down. So, yep, that really keeps the zombies a-flowing, even if you're not hitting too many tokens. All right, there you go. That is the fully dissected zombie deck. Hopefully you enjoyed looking at its guts, kind of exploring what horrors await. I am, in my next video, or at least somewhere in the near future, a little bit closer to Halloween, going to play against this deck using the sealed deck I developed from the Duskmourn pre-release kit. You can look for that video also on the channel if you missed that earlier. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this. You're interested in seeing me face off against it later. That is it for now. It looks like I spoke too soon. I actually remember that I wanted to tell you why I was using a plain chase box to store this. Now, obviously, the box is good for fitting these rule cards that I would give out to people, but that's not the only reason why I needed an oversized box to go with my copy of the Zombie Horde. If I was playing in a multiplayer scenario, not solo, I would sometimes slip this into the deck, which can really, really turn the game up on the side of its head. This is an emblem that would come into play if you hit it at just the right time, called Master of the Horde. And what it does is when this emblem is revealed, the player with the highest total number of permanents on the battlefield, plus cards in hand, gains control of the emblem. In case of a tie, the oldest of those tied gains control of the emblem. The player is no longer a survivor, but is now considered Master of the Horde. The Master gains a new separate starting life total equal to the current life total of the survivors, and the survivors all gain separate life totals equal to the current life total of the survivors divided by the number of remaining survivors rounded up. That's pretty convoluted. When I first made this card, I was trying to set it up so that you would end up with life totals essentially similar to a game where, somebody would have a clear advantage and become the arch enemy. Now I might just say, you note the life total of everybody. Each person gets that life total except for the Master of the Horde, who gets double that life total. It might make the game run longer, though, but, it might also make the math simpler. In any case, the remainder of the game is played using arch-enemy rules, with the survivors winning if they defeat the Master of the Horde, and vice versa. The Horde deck can no longer be attacked or targeted, and the game continues as normal if the Horde deck runs out of cards. But for the rest of the game, Master of the Horde assumes control of the Horde deck and also gets an arch-enemy scheme deck of his or her choice. The Master controls all Horde creatures, and all creatures the Master controls are considered part of the Horde. The Master plays on the Horde's turn. Horde creatures now attack and block as normal for the Master. They don't automatically have haste, they don't have to attack, and they can block. Master reveals cards from the Horde deck as normal at the start of the Horde's turn, and all tokens revealed are put onto the battlefield. The last non-token card revealed is placed directly into the Horde's graveyard, and its effect is replaced by that of a scheme card drawn from the top of the archenemy deck. So this counts as the scheme normally played by the archenemy Master for the turn. Okay, so, you're getting, as the Master of the Horde, you're getting more zombies every turn as normal. You're able to cast your own spells as normal, but you're no longer getting the spells that are embedded in the Horde deck. Instead, you're getting the Archenemy spell that's coming from your Archenemy deck, which is what I've stored in the back of this Plane Chase box. Okay, so the one that I put in here, I think, matches the theme. There's my extra Horde rule sets for other players. This Archenemy deck very much plays with resurrecting the dead, right? We have schemes. If you're not familiar with Archenemy, they're just kind of like spells that automatically happen for you on your turn. It says, when you set the scheme in motion, each opponent reveals his or her hand. Choose a non-land card from each of those hands. The players discard those cards. Every hope shall vanish. I delight in your convulsion scheme. When you set this scheme in motion, each opponent loses 3 life and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. Realms befitting my majesty. When you set the scheme in motion, search your library for up to 2 basic lands. Put them under the battlefield tapped. Shuffle your library. Only blood ends your nightmares. When you set the scheme in motion, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Then each opponent who didn't sacrifice a creature discards 2 cards. So you can see these are all set up to really give the single player some extra kind of advantages against the rest of the team. If you're playing with a group of 4 players, it's going to be a 3-on-1, but you have these really powerful effects. On top of that, some extra zombies to help you win the game. Display of My Dark Power. When you set the scheme in motion until your next turn, whenever a player taps a land for mana, player adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool of any type that land produced. So, this one boosts everyone's mana. Which of you burns the brightest? When you set the scheme in motion, you may pay X if you do the scheme deals X damage to target opponent for each creature he or she controls. Your puny minds cannot fathom. When you set the scheme in motion, draw 4 cards. You have no maximum hand size until your next turn. Your inescapable doom. At the beginning, it's an ongoing scheme, so it sits out. At the beginning of your end step, put a doom counter on the scheme, and then the scheme deals damage equal to the number of doom counters on it to the opponent with the highest life total among your opponents. This is why we had to divide up the life totals, because Archenemy is meant to be played against individual players with separate life totals. If 2 or more players are tied for highest life total, you choose one. Imprison the insolent wretch. Ongoing scheme. When you set the scheme in motion, choose an opponent. Permanents the chosen player control don't untap during his or her untap step. The chosen player is attacked or becomes the target of a spell or ability. Abandon the scheme. Surrender your thoughts. When you set the scheme in motion, target opponent chooses self or others. If the player chooses self, he or she discards 4 cards. If they choose the others, each of your other opponents discards 2 cards. All shall smolder in my wake. When you set the scheme in motion, destroy up to 1 target artifact and up to 1 target enchantment, up to 1 target non-basic land. Choose your champion. When you set the scheme in motion, target opponent chooses a player. Until your next turn, only you and the chosen player can cast spells or attack with creatures. So you see we do have doubles of some of these. My Undead Horde Awakens. At the beginning of your end step, you may put target creature from an opponent's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. When a creature is put onto the battlefield with this scheme and it's put into a graveyard, abandon this scheme. So it's an ongoing one where you can continue to bring back creatures from the grave. Very on theme. All right. Your fate is thrice sealed. When you set the scheme in motion, reveal 3 cards of your top 3 cards of your library. Put all lands revealed this way onto the battlefield and the rest into your hand. The dead shall serve. When you set the scheme in motion, each opponent put up to 1 target creature from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Each of those creatures attacks its owner each combat if able. Tell your old master I said hello. Introductions are in order. When you set the scheme in motion, choose one, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, shuffle your library, or you can put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. And Dance Pathetic Marionette. When you set the scheme in motion, each opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until she reveals a creature card. Choose one of the revealed creature cards and put it onto the battlefield under your control. Put all other cards revealed this way into their owner's graveyard. So yeah, kind of a fun way, again, kind of in the betrayal theme where somebody, you know, is actually the puppet master of this horde. They're the reason why the zombies are there. You didn't know it, and you had them amongst you the entire time. So kind of playing into that classic horror movie trope where you get that twist at the end. All right, that, I believe, has truly dissected the horde, and it will stay in its grave this time. I hope you enjoyed this overview of the deck and of the arch enemy deck that I use with it at some particular cases. Again, be on the lookout for my play against this deck sometime in the coming month.